That was the story of Thorn's Reckoning, a powerful story about how betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and how true strength isn't about what you have, but what you're willing to fight for. The worst betrayals often happen when we're blinded by ambition, and redemption is found not in getting back what was lost, but in building something new and real from the ashes. What did you think of Clara's decision in the end? Was Marcus's fate deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a powerful drama, and be sure to subscribe for more emotional, real-life stories every week. The rain was bitterly cold for October, and it plastered Clara Hayes's thin trench coat to the unmistakable swell of her stomach. She fumbled for her keys, a moment of irritation flashing through her. Marcus was supposed to have the car service waiting for her after her final prenatal appointment, but he'd been consumed by the Singapore deal for weeks. She'd let herself be convinced that his absence was a sign of his dedication, a sacrifice for their future, for the baby. She put the key in the lock of their magnificent Upper West Side brownstone. It didn't turn. She jiggled it. Nothing. Frowning, she tried the backup key. It slid in but met a solid, unmoving resistance. The locks had been changed. A cold dread, far deeper than the October rain, seeped into her bones. She pressed the bell, the familiar, cheerful chime now sounding like a threat. "Just a moment," a voice trilled from inside, a voice that was not her husband's. The heavy oak door swung open. Standing in the foyer, bathed in the warm light of her chandelier, was a woman. Clara recognized her instantly. Isabel Rostova, her husband's COO, a striking, severe woman with raven black hair and a gaze that always seemed to be calculating. But this wasn't Isabel from the office. This Isabel was wearing Marcus's favorite cashmere robe, the dark blue one Clara had bought him for his birthday. A tumbler of amber liquid swirled in her hand. "Isabel, what's going on?" Clara's voice was breathy, confused. "Why are the locks changed? Where is Marcus?" Isabel smiled, a slow, reptilian movement of her lips. "Marcus is in Singapore, Clara. He's finalizing the deal. He left me in charge of the transition." "Transition?" Clara's hand instinctively went to her belly, a protective shield. "What transition? Let me in, it's pouring." She tried to step past, but Isabel shifted, blocking the doorway with her body. The power imbalance was immediate and absolute. Clara was outside, pregnant, wet, and locked out. Isabel was inside, warm and in possession. "That's the thing, Clara," Isabel said, taking a delicate sip of the scotch. "It's not your house anymore. Marcus has decided to divest himself of non-performing assets." Clara's mind struggled to catch up. This was business language. This was a hostile takeover. "Non-performing assets? I'm his wife. I'm carrying his child." "You were his wife. The papers were filed this morning. Irreconcilable differences." Isabel's gaze dropped to Clara's stomach. "And the attachment is precisely the liability he's cutting loose. He can't have this kind of messy distraction while building an empire. Filed? He can't. We didn't talk." A wave of nausea and dizziness swept over her. "This is insane. Marcus would never—" "Marcus would, and Marcus did." Isabel's voice was sharp, cutting. "He signed the power of attorney over to me 2 weeks ago. I'm handling all his domestic affairs, and the first order of business was removing you. Your things are in storage. You'll get a link to the inventory tomorrow." "My things? The nursery?" Clara thought of the small, pale yellow room she had spent a month painting, the antique mobile of wooden birds she had found in a small shop upstate. "All of it. It was a package deal." Isabel leaned against the doorframe. "You were always so trusting, Clara. You thought being his inspiration was a job title. You thought this baby would be an anchor. It's not. It's dead weight. And Marcus always cuts the dead weight." The betrayal was so profound, so sudden, It was like a physical blow. This wasn't just an affair. This was an eviction, an erasure. "He will call me," Clara whispered, shaking, her teeth chattering from cold and shock. "When he lands, he will call me, and he will fix this." "He won't?" Isabel's smile widened. "Because I'm the one holding his phone. I'm the one who told him you'd left for your mother's in California, that you couldn't handle the stress of the deal and needed space. He's relieved, honestly. He'll be persuadable to my version of events when he returns." She tossed the rest of the scotch onto the wet marble steps, the liquid splashing near Clara's feet. "Go to a hotel. The firm will cover it for one night. After that, you're on your own. Goodbye, Clara." The door clicked shut. The deadbolt, the one she had heard from the outside, slid home. Clara Hayes stood there for a full minute, the rain washing away the tears she hadn't yet realized she was crying. She reached into her purse for her phone to call her mother, to call anyone. But her hand brushed against her wallet. She pulled out her cards. The Amex Black, the joint checking debit. She tried to call Marcus. The phone went straight to voicemail. "This is Marcus Thorne. Leave a message." She tried to call her mother. Call failed. Her phone plan had been disconnected. She walked in a daze to the end of the block, the wind whipping her wet hair against her face. She found a bodega, the light garish and buzzing. She tried to buy a bottle of water. The card machine beeped. Declined. She tried the debit card. Declined. Account frozen. Isabel hadn't just taken her home. She had taken her name, her money, and her past. Clara Hayes, wife of a billionaire, was 8 months pregnant, standing in a rainy bodega with $2.37 in change at the bottom of her purse. There is a particular kind of numbness that follows absolute catastrophe. Clara's body moved, but her mind was still on the steps, staring at the closed door. She used her change to take the subway, a jolting, fluorescent-lit ride that felt like a descent into another world. She hadn't ridden the subway in 5 years. She ended up at a small 4th-floor walk-up in the East Village, leaning on the buzzer until a voice crackled over the intercom. "Who is it? It's 10 p.m. "Maya, it's me, it's Clara." The buzzer sounded instantly. Maya Chen was not just Clara's friend. She was the maid of honor Clara had insisted on, much to Marcus's polite confusion. Maya was a legal aid attorney who fought slumlords. She wore thrift store blazers and an expression of perpetual righteous anger. She was the complete opposite of Marcus's polished world. Maya opened the door, and her professional fury dissolved. "Clara, oh my God, you're soaked. What happened? The baby?" "He locked me out, Maya," Clara whispered, and then the numbness broke. She collapsed into her friend's arms, sobbing, the story pouring out of her in broken, hypoxic gasps. The locks, the robe, Isabel, the baby, the frozen cards. Maya's apartment was a mess of legal briefs and takeout containers. She sat Clara on her lumpy couch, wrapped her in an old university sweatshirt, and made her hot, sweet tea. For 10 minutes, Maya just listened, her expression hardening from concern to a cold, controlled rage. "Okay," Maya said, her voice quiet. "She didn't just kick you out, Clara. She executed a strategic dissolution of your life. This isn't a cheating husband. This is a corporate purge." "But why?" Clara cried, cradling the hot mug. "Marcus, he loved me. We were so happy. We wanted this baby." "Did you?" Maya asked, not unkindly. "Or did you want this baby, and he wanted the idea of a legacy?" Clara flashed back. Marcus at the ultrasound, his eyes on his phone, looking up just in time for the snapshot. "It's a boy. Perfect. A Thorne heir." He'd clapped the doctor on the back, all charm, but he hadn't held her hand. He hadn't asked how she was feeling. "He's been distant," Clara admitted, the small, paper-cut doubts of the last 6 months now bleeding profusely. He said it was the Singapore deal. He said it would set us up for life. It set him up, Maya corrected. Isabel Rostova, I know that name. She's his COO, right? The Hatchet Woman. She joined Thorn Properties 2 years ago. Rumor is she's the one who's tripled his net worth by gutting every compassionate clause in his portfolio. Maya was already on her laptop, her fingers flying. Okay, so he filed for divorce in Delaware, not New York. Smart, corporate-friendly. He's claiming desertion. He's claiming you abandoned the marital home. But that's a lie. It's the lie she told him, and it's the lie he's willing to believe because it's convenient, Maya said. And he used a power of attorney to freeze your joint assets, claiming spousal misconduct and misappropriation of funds. She's building a case that you were a flight risk and a gold digger. She's not just taking your house, she's trying to take your child. Clara felt the baby kick, a sharp, sudden jab under her ribs, as if he too was fighting back. The fear was paralyzing. What do I do? I have nothing, Maya. I have $2. No, Maya said, closing the laptop. You have me. And you have the one thing Marcus and Isabel don't understand. You have no more illusions. They think you're a porcelain doll. They have no idea what you're made of. Maya stood up and pulled a stack of blankets from her closet. You're staying here. Tonight, you sleep. Tomorrow, we go to my office. We're not going to fight his divorce lawyers. That's what they want. We're going to file an emergency petition for spousal support and child welfare, and we're going to file an injunction against Isabel Rostova for undue influence and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Clara looked at her friend, this fierce 5'4" warrior. Can we win? I don't know, Maya said honestly. He's a billionaire, Clara. He owns the judges. He owns the city. But I'm too stupid to be scared of billionaires. And right now, he's in Singapore. He's left the wolf in charge of his hen house. Let's see what happens when the wolf realizes she's been locked in with us. For the first time in 24 hours, Clara took a deep breath. It was a shallow, painful breath, but it was hers. She wasn't Mrs. Thorne anymore. She was just Clara. And she was a mother. The fight had just begun. The brownstone was silent, save for the hum of the wine fridge. Isabel Rostova stood in the master bathroom, a space larger than her first 3 apartments combined. She ran her hand over the cool, veined marble. She'd always despised this bathroom. It was too soft, too Clara, all rounded edges, plush white rugs, and vanilla-scented candles. She opened the medicine cabinet. Clara's prenatal vitamins, her expensive face creams. Isabel swept them all into the trash. She replaced them with her own stark, clinical bottles. This wasn't about Marcus. Marcus was a means to an end. He was an arrogant, brilliant, emotionally stunted man who saw the world as a series of assets to be acquired. Isabel understood that. She spoke his language. Clara, with her soft-focus love and her belief in partnership, was speaking a language he'd long since forgotten. Isabel walked through the house, glass of scotch in hand. She'd chosen Marcus's best, a 30-year Macallan, a drink for a victory. She paused at the nursery. The pale yellow walls, the hand-carved wooden birds. She felt a brief, unfamiliar pang. Not guilt, contempt. It was a room built on a fantasy that a man like Marcus Thorne could be domesticated. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus, a text from Singapore. Deal closing, long night. Hope you're holding down the fort. Isabel smiled. Everything is under control, Em. Focus on the win. We'll celebrate when you're back. She had been planning this for 3 years. Not the affair. That was a recent, messy, but necessary complication. The plan was the destruction. She opened her briefcase, which sat on Clara's antique writing desk, and pulled out a worn, creased photograph. A younger, happier-looking man with tired eyes, standing in front of a small construction site. Rostova and Son Builders. Daniel Rostova, her father. Marcus Thorne hadn't always been a billionaire. 15 years ago, he was just another ruthless mid-level developer. Her father, a small-time contractor, had been his partner on a project. Marcus, seeing a legal loophole in the zoning permits, had restructured the deal, pushed her father out, and bankrupted him. It wasn't just business. It was personal. Marcus had destroyed her family. Her father died of a heart attack 6 months later, his name ruined, his business gone. Isabel, then just 22, had sworn an oath. She wouldn't just take Marcus's money. She would take his life. She'd changed her name, gone to business school, and clawed her way up. When she finally landed an interview at Thorne Properties, she was ready. She was smarter than him, hungrier, and she didn't have his one weakness, a conscience. She'd made herself indispensable. She'd orchestrated the Singapore deal, a masterpiece of financial engineering that would double his company's value. And she'd poisoned his mind against his wife. It was subtle at first. "Clara called the office again, Marcus. She's worried about your stress." "I had to move your meeting. Clara had a doctor's appointment she said you promised to attend." "She's so emotional lately. Maybe the hormones? She's worried we're spending too much." Then, the master stroke. A few weeks ago, she had manufactured proof that Clara was confiding in a rival developer, a man who was, in fact, Isabel's own cousin, playing a part. She'd suggested Clara was leaking information, that she was building a nest egg to leave him. Marcus, already paranoid and stressed from the deal, had swallowed the bait. He saw betrayal everywhere. "She's a liability," Isabel had told him, using his own word. "Let me handle her. Let me insulate you. Sign this power of attorney. I'll move her out quietly to one of the penthouses. I'll manage her finances until the deal is closed. Just focus on Singapore." He had signed it without reading the fine print. The fine print that gave her total control of his personal and liquid assets. Now she was in his house. His wife was gone. And in 72 hours, when the Singapore deal was finalized, she would execute the final phase. While Marcus was in the air, she would use his own assets to trigger a margin call, leveraging the new acquisition against his old debts. He wouldn't just lose his wife, he would lose his company. Isabel Rostova finished her drink. She was not a mistress trying to steal a husband. She was a daughter avenging her father. And she had just burned Marcus Thorne's empire to the ground. She just had to wait for him to fly home and notice the ashes. Marcus Thorne despised flying commercial. He sat in the custom-designed cabin of his Gulfstream G650, a sterile beige and chrome tube hurtling him away from Singapore. The deal was done. He'd just acquired Asia's largest independent rate. He was no longer a New York billionaire. He was a global one. He should have been euphoric. Instead, he was exhausted and vaguely annoyed. His phone, finally back in his hand after 48 hours of secure room negotiations, felt alien. Isabel had been managing his communications, and her updates had been efficient. "Clara is settled. Don't worry. Legal is handled. Focus." He'd been grateful for the buffer. Clara, she was a good woman. The best. But she was soft. She didn't understand the pressure. Her constant, gentle questions. "When will you be home? Are you eating? Do you think the baby can feel your stress?" had felt less like concern and more like accusations. When Isabel had shown him the evidence, texts from Clara to that weasel, Alex Vasily, a competitor, he hadn't felt betrayal. He'd felt offended. Offended that she was so clumsy, so stupid. And then, the cold, hard logic had taken over. A pregnant, emotional wife, potentially leaking information? It was a risk he couldn't afford. Isabel's solution was, as always, clean. Move Clara out. Freeze the assets to stop the leak. Give her space. Handle the problem. He'd been relieved to sign the papers, to delegate the emotional mess. Now, cruising at 40,000 feet, a sliver of discomfort pricked at him. He hadn't spoken to his wife in a week. He was about to be a father. He looked at the picture on his phone's lock screen. It was from a year ago, at a gala. Clara, luminous in a green dress, looking at him with an unguarded adoration that, at the time, he'd found fitting. Now, it just made him feel tired. He poured himself a Macallan 18. He'd earned it. His satellite phone rang. It was his personal banker from Credit Suisse. "Marcus." The voice was tight, anxious. "We have a problem, a significant problem." Marcus sat up. "What is it, Jean-Pierre?" "There's been a series of margin calls against your personal portfolio. They were triggered an hour ago, leveraged against the new Singapore acquisition. Marcus, the orders are coming from inside your company, using your digital signature." The blood drained from Marcus's face. The glass in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. "That's impossible. I'm in the air. The only other person with that authority is Isabel Rostova. Whoever it is, they've initiated a catastrophic liquidation. They're dumping Thorn stock to cover the margin. The market is closed, but in pre-trading, your stock is down 60%. Marcus, by the time the market opens in New York, you'll be wiped out. You have to stop this." Marcus's mind raced. This wasn't a mistake. This was a coup. "Isabel," he whispered. She had played him. The lies about Clara, the power of attorney, the Singapore deal. It wasn't the prize, it was the trigger. She'd used his own ambition as the gun, and his signature as the bullet. He tried Isabel's number, straight to voicemail. He tried his office. No answer. He slammed his fist against the bulkhead. "Get me to New York, now!" he roared at the pilot. "Tell them it's a medical emergency. I don't care. Land." He was 14 hours away. 14 hours from financial ruin. He stared out the window at the endless, dark ocean below. He'd been so focused on the enemy in front of him that he never saw the one sitting at his right hand. And then a new, colder thought hit him. If Isabel had done this to his company, what exactly had she handled when it came to his wife? The text message he'd ignored. "Clara is settled," now seemed infinitely sinister. He'd delegated the mess. He was beginning to realize the mess was all he had left. The waiting room at the St. Jude's Women's Clinic was painted a relentlessly cheerful, peeling mint green. It smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Clara sat on a hard plastic chair, her knees pressed together, her hands folded over the swell of her belly. This was her rock bottom. After 2 days at Maya's, Clara had woken up with a terrifying, sharp cramping. Maya, panicked, had put her in a cab, paid for in cash, to the nearest public clinic. She was surrounded by women. Teenagers staring at their phones, exhausted mothers trying to wrangle toddlers, women who looked like the city had chewed them up and spit them out. And then there was her, Clara, in her $200 maternity dress, now wrinkled and stained. The other women looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and resentment. She was a tourist in their world of real-world suffering. "Clara Hayes?" a nurse called. Clara winced, rising. The name felt wrong. She wasn't Clara Hayes, the designer. She wasn't Clara Thorne, the billionaire's wife. She was just a number in a queue. The exam room was small and cold. The nurse, a robust woman named Brenda, had a no-nonsense face and kind eyes. "All right, sweetheart, let's get you on the table. You're 35 weeks." 36, Clara whispered. "And this is your first? And your doctor is—" "Dr. Allister, at Lenox Hill." Brenda paused, her pen hovering over the chart. "You're a long way from Lenox Hill, honey. What's going on?" Clara looked at the kindness in the woman's face, and the dam of her composure, which she had held together for 48 hours, finally broke. "My husband, he left me. He froze my accounts. I have no money. I have nowhere to go. And I think I'm losing the baby." Brenda's expression didn't change. She had heard it all. She put a warm hand on Clara's arm. "Okay, let's take 'I think' out of it. Let's find out. One thing at a time." The ultrasound gel was cold. Clara stared at the ceiling, tears tracing a path to her ears. She was prepared for the worst. A silent scream. A funereal stillness. Then a sound filled the room. A strong, rhythmic, impossibly fast whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. "Well," Brenda grinned, "he's not quiet, is he? Heartbeat is a strong 150. He's just fine." Clara let out a sob of pure, unadulterated relief. "But," Brenda said, her tone shifting, "you're not fine. Your blood pressure is sky high. You're dehydrated, and these cramps are from stress. You're on the fast track to preeclampsia, and you're going to put this baby in danger if you don't stop." "Stop what?" Clara asked, helpless. "Stop being homeless? Stop being terrified? Stop thinking you're alone." Brenda handed her a tissue. "You're in the system now. We're going to get you on emergency Medicaid. We're going to get you a social worker. And we are going to make sure you and this baby are safe." "But Clara, that life you had? It's gone. You need to mourn it, and you need to mourn it fast. Because this little boy," she tapped the screen, "doesn't care about brownstones or billionaires. He just cares about you. You're his world. It's time to start acting like it." It was the cruelest and kindest thing anyone had ever said to her. The humiliation she'd felt in the waiting room was gone. The fear was still there, but it had a new companion. A cold, hard rage. Marcus hadn't just put her on the street. He had endangered his own child. Isabel hadn't just taken her home. She had tried to take her future. They thought she was a liability. They thought she was soft. Clara sat up, wiping her face. She looked at the grainy black and white image of the tiny, perfect spine on the monitor. "Brenda," Clara said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Where's the social worker's office? I need to make a phone call. I need to call my lawyer." She was done crying. She was done being a victim. She was a mother. And the people who had put her child at risk were about to find out what that meant. The Gulfstream's wheels hit the tarmac at Teterboro with a shriek that mirrored the one in Marcus's skull. He didn't wait for the stairs to fully deploy. He was down on the runway before the engines spooled down, roaring at his driver to get him to the city. His phone had been a ticker tape of Armageddon. Thorn Properties halts trading. CEO under investigation. Assets frozen pending inquiry. He was ruined. He had lost, by his banker's estimate, 90% of his net worth in 14 hours. All of it was legal. All of it was signed by him. But the money, in that moment, was secondary. The only thought in his head was Clara. What had Isabel done? "I'll move her out, quietly, to one of the penthouses." He'd called the doormen at every building he owned. No one had seen her. He'd called her mother in California, who had screamed at him with such venom that he'd dropped the phone. She hadn't heard from Clara in days. He was a monster. He hadn't just been cheated. He'd been complicit. The car screeched to a halt in front of the brownstone. The lights were on. She was still here. Isabel. He used his old key, the one he kept in his boot, a relic from his paranoid days. It worked. Of course it did. She wanted him to come here. He entered the house. It was silent. But it was different. The soft, warm scent of vanilla was gone, replaced by something sharp and floral. His scotch, the 30-year Macallan, was on the coffee table, an empty glass beside it. "Isabel!" he bellowed, his voice echoing in the marble foyer. She appeared at the top of the stairs, not in his robe, but in a perfectly tailored black dress. She looked like she was heading to a funeral. "Welcome home, Marcus," she said, her voice calm, almost pleasant. "Where is she?" he growled, advancing up the stairs. "Where is my wife?" "Wife?" Isabel laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "You don't have a wife. You filed for divorce, remember? You signed the papers. You told me to handle the mess." "I told you to move her to the penthouse. I didn't tell you to throw a pregnant woman on the street. I can't find her, Isabel." "She's not your concern anymore," Isabel said, her eyes glittering with a coldness that terrified him. "You have bigger problems." "The money," he spat. "You think I care about the money? You can have it. Give me back my wife." This, finally, broke her composure. Her face twisted in a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. "Give you back?" she hissed, following him as he stalked into the master bedroom, throwing open closets. "You don't get anything back. You don't get to fix this. You don't get to win." He turned, grabbing her by the arms. "Why? Why do this, Belle? We were a team. We were winning. We." She ripped her arms from his grasp. "There was never a we. There was only you and your monument of debt and ego. And there was me, the daughter of the man you destroyed to build it." Marcus froze. "What are you talking about?" "Daniel Rostova," she whispered. "Rostova and Son Builders. Sound familiar?" The name hit him like a physical blow. 15 years ago, a small-time contractor, a zoning loophole. Rostova, that was just business. "It was his life," she shrieked. "It was his name. He died, penniless and broken, 6 months after you restructured him out of his own company. I have spent 15 years waiting for this moment, waiting for you to be at the absolute peak of your arrogance, at the very top of your glass tower, so I could be the one to push you off." He stared at her, finally seeing the truth. The long game. The loyalty. The affair itself. A calculated move to get close, to gain his absolute trust, to isolate him from the one person who might have grounded him. You set this all up," he whispered, the full scope of her revenge settling on him. "Singapore. Singapore was the masterstroke," she said, her voice dripping with pride. "Using your greatest triumph as the very weapon to slit your throat. It's poetry, really." "And Clara?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Clara was… what? Collateral damage?" "Clara was the point," Isabel said, her voice dropping. "You didn't just take my father's money, you took his legacy, his name, his future, so I took yours, your wife, and your precious Thorn heir. You don't get to be a father, Marcus. You don't get to have a family. You get to sit in the ruins of your life just like my father did, alone." A new, frantic terror seized him. "What did you do to the baby?" Isabel smiled. "Nothing. I just let nature take its course. A pregnant woman, no money, no home, no phone. Stress is a terrible thing. I imagine the liability has resolved itself by now." Marcus roared, a sound of pure animalistic rage. He lunged, not at her, but past her toward the door. He had to find Clara. He had to find his son. "You won't find her, Marcus," Isabel called after him. "She's gone. You have nothing." He fled the house, his empire, his whole life, collapsing behind him. He finally understood. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered. He had been judged. The meeting took place at Maya Chen's office. It was a cramped, chaotic space in a pre-war building with a rattling elevator. The walls were covered in case files and pictures of rescued pit bulls. It was the last place on Earth Marcus Thorn ever expected to be. He had spent 36 hours calling every hospital, every clinic, every shelter in the 5 boroughs. He'd finally found her name in the St. Jude system, listed for a follow-up. He'd sent a message. Not a threat, not a demand, but a desperate plea to Maya's office. "Please, I just need to know she's safe." Clara agreed. 1 hour, Maya present. When she walked in, his breath caught. This was not the woman he'd left behind. She was thin, her face gaunt with stress, but her eyes were clear and hard as diamonds. The protective, pregnant swell of her belly was the only soft thing about her. She looked at him not with hatred or sadness, but with a cold, devastating indifference. "Clara," he started, moving toward her. "Don't," Maya said, stepping between them. "Sit down, Mr. Thorn. You have 1 hour." Marcus sat, his bespoke suit looking absurd among the stacks of binders. "Clara, I didn't know. I swear to you. Isabel. She manipulated everything. She told me you'd left, that you were leaking. It doesn't matter. It was lies. All of it." Clara sat opposite him, her hands folded over her stomach. She said nothing. "She's destroyed me, Clara," he said, his voice raw. "The company is gone. The money. It's all gone. She did it to avenge her father, a man I bankrupted years ago. Clara's expression didn't flicker. And you're here for… what? Absolution? You want me to feel sorry for you? No, he said, leaning forward. I'm here for you. For the baby. I want to fix this. I know the money is gone, but I have reserves. Properties she couldn't touch. We can start over. The house… The house? Clara's voice was dangerously quiet. You think this is about the house? She stood up, and for the first time, Marcus felt physically afraid of her. I sat for 6 hours, she said, her voice vibrating with a controlled fury. In a hard plastic chair in a public clinic, bleeding, thinking our son was dying. I was a charity case, Marcus. I had to sign up for Medicaid to get an ultrasound. Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. Clara, You didn't know, she continued, because you didn't ask. You didn't care. You were so wrapped up in your deal, in your legacy, that your wife and your child were a mess to be handled. You gave that vulture a power of attorney. You gave her the gun, Marcus. You told her to shoot. I was trying to protect the company, but to protect us. You were protecting you. Clara slammed her hand on the table, making the binders jump. You believed her lies because it was easy. It was easier to believe I was a traitor than to believe you were a neglectful husband. It was easier to cut me off than to have a difficult conversation. He looked at her, truly seeing the chasm between them. It wasn't built by Isabel. It was built by him. What do you want, Clara? He whispered, defeated. Whatever is left, it's yours. Name it. I don't want your money, she said. I don't want your name. I don't want anything from you. Our son, he choked out. He deserves a mother who isn't a victim. He deserves to be safe. And he will never be safe with you. Clara, please, he begged, the last of his pride shattering. He was on his knees. Don't take my son from me. He's all I have left. Clara looked down at the broken man at her feet. She thought she would feel triumph. She thought she would feel anger. Instead, she just felt tired. She felt the weight of the last 36 weeks, the weight of a love that had died so quietly she hadn't even noticed it was gone. He's not yours to have, Marcus, she said, her voice softening, which was somehow more brutal. He's mine. You didn't lose him this week. You lost him months ago, every time you chose a phone call over a doctor's appointment, every time you chose a deal over a dinner, every time you looked at me and saw a liability instead of a wife. Maya will be in touch about the divorce. I won't contest it, and I won't ask for a penny. All I want, she paused, is for you to sign away your parental rights. I'll take him, and I'll disappear. You can be free to rebuild your empire. That's what you always wanted, isn't it? To be free of the mess? He looked up, his face a mask of agony. He had lost his company, his money, and his reputation. But it was only in that moment, hearing her offer, that he understood he had lost his soul. Don't go, he whispered. I'm already gone, Clara said. She turned and walked out of the office, not looking back. She didn't need to. She was walking toward her son. He was walking into the ruins he had built. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The business world doesn't mourn. It just moves on. Thorne Properties was carved up and sold for parts by the creditors. Marcus Thorne, the man who had owned the New York skyline, was a pariah. He found himself in a small, rented condo in Jersey City, the lights of his former kingdom glittering mockingly across the river. He was not poor, not by a normal person's standards. The reserves he'd mentioned, properties in his mother's name, offshore accounts Isabel hadn't known about, left him with a few million, enough to be comfortable, enough to be haunted. He followed the news of Isabel Rostova. She hadn't vanished. She was arrested, but the case was complex. She hadn't stolen anything. She'd simply used what she was given. She'd triggered a legal, if catastrophic, financial event. The real damage, the corporate espionage charges, was harder to prove. He saw her one last time, at a preliminary hearing he wasn't supposed to be at. She walked past him in the hallway, in handcuffs, her face pale but unrepentant. "Was it worth it?" he asked her, his voice a rasp. Isabel stopped. She looked at him, her eyes as cold as ever. "My father died in a one-bedroom apartment, staring at a wall, believing he was a failure. I live in a holding cell, knowing I succeeded. Yes, Marcus, it was worth it." She was, he realized, the only person in the whole affair who had been true to herself. But his reckoning wasn't with Isabel. It was with the silence of his empty condo, the silence of his phone, which never rang. He'd done what Clara asked. He'd signed the papers. He'd given up his son. It was the only act of love he had ever truly committed, to remove his own toxic presence from his child's life. Maya, in a final act of professional courtesy, had sent him one thing: a bill. Not for her services, but a copy of the bill from St. Jude's Clinic. Total, $1,250. Paid by Medicaid. He'd stared at it for an hour. All the billions, and he hadn't been able to pay a $1,250 hospital bill for his own child. He paid the state back, an anonymous donation to the clinic for 100 times the amount. It felt hollow. It was the act of a rich man, not the act of a father. He had spent his life acquiring. He had acquired buildings, companies, art, and a beautiful wife. And when he'd lost them, he realized he had never valued any of them. He had only valued the win. Now, sitting in the dark, with the skyline he used to own staring back at him, Marcus Thorne was finally, truly, alone. He had won the Singapore deal, and in doing so, he had lost the entire world. The light that streamed into Clara's new apartment was bright, clear, and unfiltered. It was a 2-bedroom rental in Brooklyn, above a Polish bakery. It smelled of coffee and fresh bread in the mornings. It was perfect. The second bedroom was no longer pale yellow. It was a vibrant, cheerful blue. In the center of it stood a simple crib, and in that crib slept Theodore Theo Chen Hayes. He was 3 months old. He had Clara's eyes and a furious, determined little frown that was all Maya. Clara hadn't just survived. She'd rebuilt. She and Maya had started a small firm, Chen and Hayes Designs. Maya handled the legal side of property law, protecting tenants, fighting zoning boards. Clara designed spaces for people, not for portfolios. She specialized in community centers, clinics, and affordable housing. She'd even redesigned the waiting room at St. Jude's, painting it a warm, welcoming terracotta and filling it with durable, comfortable furniture. Her life was small, and it was real. She was rocking Theo in the living room, sketching a design for a rooftop garden, when the buzzer rang. It was a delivery, a large, flat box. There was no return address, but she knew. She opened it. Inside was a painting. It wasn't a priceless original. It was a simple, beautiful watercolor of the view from their old brownstone, looking out over the park in autumn. It was a painting she herself had bought at a student art fair before she even met Marcus. It had hung in her small pre-marriage apartment. He had kept it. Or more likely, it had been in the storage unit Isabel had packed up. At the bottom of the box was a small, plain envelope. Inside, a single card. "I know I have no right, but I wanted his first inheritance to be something that was yours, not mine. I am so sorry, Clara." There was no signature. She looked at the painting. It was a picture of a life that felt like a dream, a life that belonged to someone else. She thought she would feel a sting of anger, or the ghost of pain. She felt nothing, just a quiet, settled peace. She put the painting down, leaning it against the wall. She wouldn't hang it, but she wouldn't throw it away. It was a part of her story, the part that had led her here. Theo stirred, making a small, fussy noise. Clara smiled, her attention snapping back to the only thing that mattered. "Shh, baby," she whispered, kissing the top of his head. "It's just us. We're home." She picked him up, holding him close, and went to the window. She looked out not at a grand park or a glittering skyline, but at the bustling, beautifully imperfect Brooklyn street. It was all hers. That was the story of Thorn's Reckoning. A powerful story about how betrayal can come from the most unexpected places, and how true strength isn't about what you have, but what you're willing to fight for. The worst betrayals often happen when we're blinded by ambition, and redemption is found not in getting back what was lost, but in building something new and real from the ashes. What did you think of Clara's decision in the end? Was Marcus's fate deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a powerful drama, and be sure to subscribe for more emotional, real-life stories every week.